The story of the Exodus. I mean, you know it, right? Moses, the 10 plagues, the parting of the sea. It's one of the most famous stories ever told. It's a total cornerstone for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, shaping the faith of billions. But for decades, mainstream archaeology has had a very direct, and frankly, a very disappointing answer to the question, did it really happen?
And that quote right there pretty much sums up the prevailing scholarly view. For all its power as a story, there's been a complete lack of direct, physical proof that the Israelites were ever enslaved in Egypt or escaped in some kind of mass exodus. It's a foundational story with no actual foundation in the ground.
But a documentary called The Exodus Decoded comes along and proposes this radical, pretty controversial new idea. What if everyone has been digging in the wrong century? It's this fascinating alternative perspective that suggests if you just shift the timeline, the entire story from the plagues to the parting of the sea suddenly clicks into place with a stunning cascade of historical and geological events.
So let's dive in. You really have to think of the Exodus as one of history's greatest cold cases. We all know the story, but for the longest time, scholars just couldn't find the fingerprints.
I mean, the biblical account is absolutely epic. Moses confronts Pharaoh, God unleashes 10 catastrophic plagues, and the Israelites escape slavery by crossing a parted sea. It's this incredible narrative of liberation. But despite decades and decades of searching, archaeologists have found, well, nothing. No remains of Israelite camps in the Sinai desert, no Egyptian records that even mention a guy named Moses, and certainly no drowned chariot armies at the bottom of the Red Sea.
This is where the investigation takes a huge turn. The central claim here is that scholars have traditionally been looking for evidence around the time of Pharaoh Ramses II. The new theory argues that's about 200 years too late. This shift in the timeline is everything. It's the core of the whole theory. The traditional search, set around 1270 BCE, finds nothing. But by moving the Exodus back to around 1500 BCE, during the reign of a pharaoh named Ahmose I, a whole new world of potential evidence just suddenly snaps into focus. It's like changing the combination on a lock you've been trying to open for centuries.
And this time shift is so critical because it creates a perfect storm of events. Around 1700 BCE, Egyptian records actually show a group of Semites they called the Amu arriving in Egypt. Then, you fast forward to 1500 BCE, and what do we have? The Hyksos expulsion, a well-documented historical event where another Semitic group that had risen to power in Egypt were driven out in a massive exodus. And happening at the exact same time, one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history, the explosion of Santorini. 3 massive events, all lining up perfectly.
So with this new timeline in place, that brings us to the 10 plagues. For believers, they're straight-up miracles. For skeptics, they're just fiction. But this new timeline offers a third option, a natural disaster of truly biblical proportions.
This connection is the crucial linchpin. The theory doesn't try to dismiss the biblical account, but instead it looks for a scientific mechanism behind it. So could the eruption of Santorini, 700 kilometers away, have triggered a chain reaction that perfectly matches the plagues one by one?
Okay, let's walk through this proposed domino effect. It starts with an earthquake storm caused by the volcano. This releases gas from the Nile riverbed, which rusts the iron in the water, turning it blood red. That's plague number 1. This kills the fish, which forces the frogs out onto the land, plague 2. The lack of clean water then leads to lice, flies, boils, and disease, plagues 3 through 6. Then boom, the main eruption happens, sending volcanic hail, or fire and ice, and a massive ash cloud that causes total darkness, plagues 7 and 9. Finally, the theory proposes one last release of heavy carbon dioxide gas from all the volcanic activity. This gas is heavier than air, so it would have hugged the ground, silently suffocating anyone sleeping on low beds, which, in that culture, was traditionally the firstborn male. And here's the thing, there's actual physical evidence cited to back this up. Scientists have found Santorini ash embedded in the soil of the Nile Delta, which confirms the ash cloud definitely reached Egypt. The weird hail of fire, a type of volcanic hail called accretionary lapilli, is described not just in the Bible but also in an ancient Egyptian text called the Ipu or Papyrus. And most chillingly, mass graves found at the ancient city of Avris from this exact period, they contain only male victims, which is completely consistent with the final plague.
Okay, so beyond the plagues, if this timeline shift is correct, there should be a whole trail of archaeological proof, right? Well, proponents of this theory say there is. It's just been overlooked because everyone thought it was from the wrong century.
Take the Amos stele.
It was carved by the very same pharaoh, almost the first, that the theory says was the pharaoh of the Exodus. And what does it describe? A terrifying catastrophe. A great storm, days of darkness, and, get this, for polytheistic Egypt, it says this all happened when God, singular, showed his power. It's basically an Egyptian account that mirrors the Bible's.
Next up, we go to Avaris, the Hyksos capital. So the Bible says Joseph, son of Jacob, rose to become second in command in Egypt, while archaeologists digging at Avaris found 9 royal seals from this exact period with the Hebrew name Yaakov or Jacob on them. This is the only time in Egyptian history that a Hebrew name ever appears on a royal seal.
But the story isn't just about rising to power, it's also about enslavement. And here too, there are clues. In these ancient turquoise mines in the Sinai, archaeologists found the world's oldest alphabetic inscriptions. And who wrote them? Semitic slaves. And what does one of these 3,500-year-old carvings say? It's a desperate plea, El, save me. El is one of the Bible's primary names for God.
Now this next piece could be a total game changer. For centuries, the search for evidence has focused on the Red Sea. But the original Hebrew text doesn't say Red Sea. It says Yam Suf, which actually translates to Reed Sea. And reeds don't grow in saltwater oceans. They grow in freshwater lakes and marshes. This points the entire search to a completely different location.
So if the crossing happened at this Reed Sea, is there a scientific explanation for it? Well, the theory connects it right back to the volcano. A massive, seismically triggered landslip into the Mediterranean could have temporarily raised the lake bed, creating a land bridge, only for a resulting tsunami to come rushing back in and completely engulf the pursuing army.
But maybe the most remarkable piece of evidence was found really far away in Mycenae, Greece. This 3,500-year-old stone carving is like a movie in 3 frames. Frame 1. You see a man in a chariot chasing a man holding a staff across parted land. Frame 2. The man with the staff turns as these huge walls of water rise up. Frame 3. The chariot, the rider, the horses, all of it are completely engulfed by the waves. It looks for all the world like an eyewitness account, carved in stone.
So we've shifted the timeline, we've found a potential scientific cause for the plagues, and we've uncovered this trail of archaeological evidence that seems to match the biblical narrative step by step. So what's the final takeaway here?
Well, the search for evidence actually extends beyond Egypt. For example, by using 3 geographical clues from the Bible, the travel time from Egypt, the distance from Midianite territory, and the journey time to a place called the Kadesh Barnea, the filmmakers are able to triangulate a single, precise location in the Sinai Desert for the real Mount Sinai, far from the traditional tourist.
And the theory's most startling, most jaw-dropping claim comes from that very same tomb in Mycenae, where the sea-parting carving was found. Archaeologists also uncovered this golden object. The documentary argues it's a head-on depiction of the tabernacle altar, the ramp, and right in the center, the Ark of the Covenant itself, potentially the only image of the Ark ever made by someone who actually saw it.
So where does this leave us with this really compelling but, still controversial theory? Is this a chain of evidence that proves the historical reality of the Bible's most famous story? Or is it a brilliant weaving together of a massive volcanic eruption, a historical expulsion, and a collection of artifacts that were later mythologized into the story we all know today?
And that really brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? The science can try to explain the how the sea could part, how the plagues could fall in that perfect sequence, but it can never answer the why. Was it all just a random, cataclysmic coincidence? Or, as the biblical authors believed, was nature itself being orchestrated? That's a question science can't answer, leaving the final verdict up to you.